Hello and welcome to Lands Unknown. My name is Will, and today we are joined by Biblaridion of Biblaridion to talk
Hello.
about huh?
Hello.
To talk about speculative biology and to develop the dominant terrestrial group in the Zaalean Realm. I think everyone here should know Bib from languages from the Refugium and stuff like ecological, and then also the Alien Biosphere series. And now you're doing alien anthropology.
Which is basically the same as alien biospheres, except, you know, just tweaked slightly. But
Slight tweaks.
yeah.
And we've got a bunch of regulars. Hello, Kate, Ryder 2, Yan, Jake, and
Hello.
Supernatural Ecology. Wow. And so we are going to start by um, I'm just going to briefly introduce the thought behind SpecBio and the project. I'll talk about this more in the sort of companion footnotes video after I've finished the rest of the biogeography over this year. But the main idea is to use this series to eventually talk about the social sciences, geography and anthropology, through world building and how we can use those sorts of things to develop worlds. And as such, I had certain limitations. One, I wanted legally distinct humans, which are the Dovians, so I can talk about, uh, you know, anthropology and geography within a more human context. So that was a constraint I had. So we do need something like mammals in order to get something like humans. And then there are, because I want to talk about certain kinds of domestication, so, horses play a really big role and they're kind of unique. As far as their domesticates go, there is a critter which is more or less a horse, which I talked about in the chariots video during the world building festival last year. But we're clearly going beyond that. I mean, we've got dragons and other things as well. And while Arukia is a little bit more familiar with the monotrematoforms and dracoforms that are there, Zalea and Lanautyche are going to be a bit different because we are going to have critters that are descended from what are essentially the Baceriforms. And we can take a step back in history for a second. We can look at, here we go, 50 million years ago. Great. So, from, for a long period of time, here we go. From about 250 million years ago until about 50 million years ago, this continent here, Protobacera, has been largely separated from Elearukia, which itself split up into Elea and Arukia. And on Protobacera, you had the Baceriforms. I know, very, very creative. And the Baceriforms eventually include the Dracoforms, like the Arukian dragons and stuff like that. But they're also going to include a large group of extinct animals, the non dragon Baceriforms. And those ones were the dominant group up until, about 75 million years ago when there was a massive extinction. Similarly on Elearukia, there were the Elearuciforms, which were the dominant group. They went extinct around a similar time, and that is when the Mammaliforms kind of emerged. And in Lanautyche, which is this sort of, let's go to the other one here. In the Lanautychean realm, the Dracoforms created a whole bunch of different groups, including, terrestrial and aerial groups and some marine groups. But Zalea was a bit different. In Zalea, we have a different group of critters not related to the Baceriformes or Ilaeoruciformes, which are more or less, cerapsids and synapsids that came to predominance. And those guys are from a completely different kind of branch. And if we head over here, I can create a new layer real quick. And this is something we mapped out in advance. So I just want to get it out of the way quickly, because then we can talk about my radical proposal and how we kind of clawed back from that, which I think is reasonable. So we've got, tetrapods. And then this way, we've got, the Bacero. I don't have a name for them yet. No. Ilaeoruciformes. So that's one root. Yeah, this isn't big enough. Okay, let's go over here. And then the other way, we are going to have what we are currently calling amphibiforms, right? So we go two ways with this, and we're going to ignore the group on the left for now.
Is those ones are fully terrestrial, right?
Yes, so the Bacero Ilaeoruciformes are fully terrestrial.
Mm-hmm.
And they are essentially like pan-reptilia. Oh, we got some more folks filtering in. Hello, Not Dane Hearts. Hello, Cools. And Arinsmic Gaming. Your videos are so awesome. Thank you. I mean, it could apply to both of us equally.
Thank you.
So for the amphibiforms, the big distinction between these two groups, and I guess if we go back very quickly to our deep dive here, when life was kind of crawling into the world, there was a supercontinent. So the amphibiforms are like the freshwater, semi-aquatic group, and they are spread across the supercontinent. Once the supercontinent splits up, we have one group, the Baceriforms kind of hang out on one side, and then the Ilaeoruciforms kind of hang out on the other side. But the amphibiforms are going to be everywhere. And one thing that is distinct about all extant amphibiforms is that they are going to be in some way male brooding.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go through this, the current version we have, and then afterwards I can kind of explain where my mind was before and why and we can give a couple of reasons why it's silly.
Well, it's not. I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's silly, but just some workshopping could help things along. But
yeah. So we've got this group over here, and this group is where when the female amphibiforms lay an egg, the eggs stick to the male amphibiforms. And they, in this case, in this branch, they stick to, I'm going to say not the trunk, but broadly the tail. So in this one, the eggs stick to the tail.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we go down here, this group that comes off, this may be better. The eggs are going to stick to the torso. And there can be, certain indentations in the torso that can kind of be where the eggs can kind of fit in.
Mm-hmm. Hello, Maddie.
Maddie! All right, so the eggs are sticking to the torso. And this is inspired both by Stygians. I think it's Stygians, or Stygianathans, I guess, which is like pipefish, seahorses, sea dragons.
Oh, it's a really weirdly spelt name, but it's Signathidae. It's got
Signathidae, right.
NGN in there, which is just a nightmare.
So Signathidae, but it's also inspired by a bunch of. There are amphibians where we also see male brooding, and we also see some amphibians where they keep the eggs in their mouths, or they stick the eggs to their bodies, and those sorts of things. Like if you're in the
Yeah, this
water
is.
and you've got
Oh, go ahead.
these free floating non-hard shelled eggs, and they're just slightly sticky and they stick, that could be something that kind of
Mm-hmm.
helps out and continues.
So
So
this
we've
is
got
the thing that's, I think, quite interesting. I don't know why this is the case, but like in aquatic, well, specifically in fish,
hmm,
um paternal parental care is actually much, much more common than maternal parental care,
yeah,
almost by a factor of 2 to 1, I think. Which I don't
wow,
know specifically why that's the case, why it's so biased in favor of male only parental care. But yeah, we also see that tendency in amphibians as well. It's a
hmm,
little bit more balanced in amphibians. And like as you say, the seahorse example very often gets brought up as like an extreme form of this, where the males have like specialized anatomy for what is essentially male pregnancy. Um, but an example that I think is sometimes overlooked is in sea spiders, which
oh,
is just a very underrated group of animals in general. The male sea spider has a special pair of appendages called oviges, which are these little like arms that are folded under the body. And
hmm,
after the male fertilizes the eggs, the female passes the eggs to the male, and the male kind of scoops them up and holds them underneath his body until they develop, which is essentially like a precursor to the same sort of thing that we see in starfish. So that idea of like, yeah, male brood care progressing to like a more anatomically specialized form,
yeah.
definitely not unprecedented and not nearly as strange as it might seem.
And so this is the next step where we have this more specialized morphology for it. And we do see this in pipefish, where they have like these flaps that can help hold the eggs. So you've got the
Mhm.
flaps that kind of come out. So the next one is the egg flaps, ova flaps. I don't know what we're going to call them, but so then there are these flaps at the side of the torso. And I guess at this stage, the critters would still have cloacas. So these are like pro-cloacal flaps that would kind of hold the eggs in place, though they're largely like fleshy, like these fleshy
Mhm.
sacs, these fleshy flaps that kind of hold it. And then from that, we get a pouch, like a proper compartment to
Mhm.
hold the eggs. And then from this egg pouch, we are going to get, the proper, essentially like the male pregnancy, like
Mhm.
full male brooding, where the female amphibiform uses an ovipositor to deposit the eggs inside of the male's brood pouch, and then the male amphibiform is going to brood the eggs and provide them with nutrients until they hatch. Yes. Oh, and then part of this as well, and something I just thought was fun, is that the original critters up here have a cloaca, so their reproductive, urinary, and digestive tracts are all connected at the rear end. But by the time we get to here, the cloaca will separate into a waste tract. So the urinary and digestive tract will expel waste through one orifice, and then there'll be a separate reproductive orifice. And in the males, that will connect directly into the brood pouch so that they can fertilize the eggs within the pouch. And this is going to be useful because the next step is that they become terrestrial.
Yes. While we're on the subject of these different sort of strategies for male brood care, one extra one that I'll just throw in. This is an idea that I have thought about implementing at several points, but I've never actually done it, is that a surprisingly common mechanism of male brood care is mouth brooding. It's pretty common for fish to, especially among those with male parental care, for the fries, the young fish, to actually stay inside the male's mouth. And I've always thought about what that would be like if that, was maintained into a terrestrial form. And then you could have some sort of species with like almost rodent-like cheek pouches that are like specific brood chambers for the young to live in. And then you could, just off the top of my head, you could actually repurpose salivary glands and turn those into like pseudo mammaries inside the cheeks.
Yes. And so part of this is because one of the goals is to have a these critters are going to be called suchiformes because they're going to look like crocodiles, not that they are crocodiles. Many things have looked like crocodiles that aren't crocodiles. And my
one of those things that just keep on cropping up. I don't know if I'm going to have time to include this in the spec con talk I'm planning, but it's one of those things. It's like crabs. They just sort of keep popping up.
And so the original idea I had was I was looking at forms of lactation that happen in not mammals. And there's a fish whose mucus glands have been kind of repurposed to create for lactation. And I was like, well, where would like a terrestrial animal have mucus glands that would be repurposed? And it's like the mouth. So the idea of a crocodile just sort of like just seeping like a white kind of viscous substance from the side of the mouth, and little kind of like lapping it up from the side was a thought I had. I have two things. So that is one of them, one direction we could go. The other direction is that, yes, milk drool. The other direction we could go is that there could be, on the brood pouch, there could be like an external feature, like a scoot or something that it can be used like a nozzle or what have you, where some sort of lactation could be secreted, that's produced in the pouch. Sort of like taking the anatomy and systems that nourish the young in the pouch as they're developing, and then, you know, externalizing that. Uh, yeah, so those are those are the two ideas I had. I do like milk drool. I think that was the original one that was in the doc. Uh,
I
yeah,
mean,
so
it's not
this
too
is
different from what a lot of, or not a lot of birds, but most famously, like emperor penguins, flamingos, and pigeons have all independently developed crop milk, where they have specialized glands in the throat that produce this, milky stuff. And interestingly, in the case of the emperor penguins, it's an exclusively male thing. So another. Mhm.
and that is the where this started actually, because I guess in the terrestrial Laneotecan drag forms, I was I am they're going to be a group of a terrestrial herbivorous group that uses crop milk, and their toxungin glands, the dragons in Arukia, for those watching, have a toxungin gland, which in the not Arukia and Dove, on the Arukian ones creates or stores a variety of irritants, but it's going to have a bunch of different uses among the terrestrial ones, and one of those was going to be producing crop milk. And that was inspired particularly by pigeons, because I love pigeons. You know, the planet's called Dove. I think pigeons are very pretty and cool. And we've done them dirty. They're our domesticates. They're our friends. And now we call them rats with wings and things. But the emperor penguin having where it's only the male, and they only produce this crop milk after the chick hatches in the period before the mother gets back from fishing, because normally the emperor penguin is, you know, huddling over the egg, and the egg hatches while the mother is gone. So he needs to be able to feed the hatchling, but he hasn't eaten for a while. So he you know, is able to create this crop milk that he can feed to the young, and he only does it for a couple weeks at max before the mother comes back, and then they're able to take turns, I guess, regurgitating sea life down the gullet of the hatchling. So that was the original thought, and my original thought was taking something from this group and then deriving a way for a terrestrial croc-like critter to both have mouth drool and develop brood, like male brooding. I think I had a very I think it was both driven by behavioral change as well as was it the flaps originally developed in that idea from a display feature. I think they were still like pro-cloacal flaps, like a display feature, like a dewlap. Yes, yeah, I have pictures of this. I don't know why. No, by pictures I mean I have my art of it. So here we go. All right. So there is the female at the top here, and then we got the male, and we can see that we have the cloacal flap. It's kind of like a dewlap of a lizard. And then there's a pre and pro cloacal flap. I think that's just that's a pre that's pre cloacal, that's pro cloacal, and then along the side, which I think we are conveniently covering, so I may flip that. Oh no, now it's the thing is covering it. And so you can see on the right hand side there where his, I think my mouse is over it. No, that's just on my screen. So on the right hand side, he's just chilling, and then he kind of opens up his flap, and they would use these flap for, what was it? Like incubating the eggs or something like that. And then eventually these leathery eggs would be, enfolded in the pouch.
Mhm.
But my issue with this was that we don't have many examples of terrestrial animals switching from the mother investing the majority of care in young to the father.
Mhm.
And in I guess pseudosuchia, like in the crocodiles that are alive today, all of them are like the mother invests the majority of the energy and effort in it. So, and then the other thing was getting the eggs from being like, hard or leathery to the stage where they would essentially be over deposited from the crocodile cow into the bowl just seemed like a lot for me.
It would be certainly unusual for the investment to sort of reverse like that. That's, as far as I'm aware, that's unprecedented. There's probably some way that it could be justified, but having it go directly from a something that in the aquatic stage was already predominantly um, paternal in
Mhm.
terms of parental care, that I think is a much easier transition to imagine.
Yeah. So doing it the semi-aquatic way from something that's somewhat amphibious, I think is the better way to go.
Hmm.
Oh, we got some. Safe to say, was expecting milk drool. Well, that's what you come here for. That is what we're offering here on Lands Unknown. Things you're not expecting. And Kate, I agree that rats are cool, but I
Hmm.
don't think most people mean it laudatory. So, I mean, once we rehabilitate rats, then maybe
Hmm.
we can.
Well, dodos are in the same family as pigeons.
Really?
They're in Columbidae, yeah. And I just feel like it's such a shame because we were so close to having. It would have been so easy if instead of just killing them all, if they were just like, hey, what if we just took a couple of these back with us?
Mm-hmm.
Then we could have had domesticated dodos.
Then we could have had dodo squab.
Kentucky
Yeah, I
Fried
think,
Dodo.
and I think seeing it really, really does help. So that's why I've tried to do more sketches and things. So now let's look here. This is kind of the doc that will be master doc that we'll be working from, and Bib can add things to this as well. So we do have some shared features. Um, and I guess first I'm going to reveal the Who's That Pokemon thing. All right, so here we go. Who's that suchiform? Boo! All right,
Oh.
so this is my idea for the. Why isn't this going away on the side? Whatever. This is the kind of idea for an ancestral suchiform that we're going to be dealing with. Um, they are fuzzy on the sort of on the bottom side. Uh, and this is because they live in a place that is glaciating, that is becoming colder, that is in an ice age. So, they're going to have some sort of fiber. And I think it would be fun if the fibers were going to be a variety of different colors. So closer to, um, birds and like the variety of colors that they produce with their fibers,
Hmm.
as opposed to mammals. Uh, and this is partially because I guess the monotrematophores are all mammals, and they're just kind of various shades of brown, more or less, and that's not very
Hmm.
fun to paint. Um,
this is something I struggle with a lot as well because I don't know. I feel like doing anything other than black or brown or occasionally like gray or white, I feel like
Yeah.
I have to have some kind of justification for it. And so it just all, they all just look very sort of grungy and brown.
So we're going to make them a variety of different colors. They're also going to have a lot of ossiderms. Oh, no, ossiderms, yes.
Osteoderm.
And osteoderms, thank you. We're going to
Mhm.
have osteoderms. We're going to have, is it ossicones? It's not osteocones.
Ossicones, yeah.
Ossicones. Great. I got them confused. We're gonna have ossicones, we're gonna have plates and spikes and like all sorts of cool stuff that's gonna develop from these. Um there are a bunch of amphibians which have osteoderms. So I think it's reasonable for those to pop up. And apparently there are some papers which argue that in the transition from a primarily aquatic to the kind of like semi-aquatic or terrestrial lifestyle that crocodiles and stuff have and reptiles have, osteoderms were helpful in maintaining moisture inside their
Mm.
skin. So it makes sense for this to develop in this group as well.
Mhm.
And again, the osteoderms and the scutes and those things can have a variety of colors too.
Mm.
I think with these ones, I kind of went with a more like crocodilian look, I suppose, like black and yellow. I think is something that they got, but yeah. So like that's some decision, and this is a bull. This is a male specimen because he has this little brood pouch down there. Some of the other features, I mean, they're standing upright. This one I made, I guess, what is it? Digitigrade, like standing up on his fingers.
Yeah.
But we can have, I think some developing some sort of hoof-like form may be fun for some groups, but they can also
Mhm.
be, was it planigrade as well.
Mhm.
And the yeah. Oh, and the other thing with the osteoderms at the top is that these ones are more scutish, like they don't have hairs and stuff, filaments coming from them, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the furry part of the body doesn't have osteoderms, because the osteoderms can be between the parts of the skin that produce the filaments, right? What was the other feature? And then in the ancestral one, the top teeth have fused together into a pseudobeak.
Mm.
It's not a proper beak because I don't believe those ones. Yeah, it's not from the skull, and it doesn't have that. I mean, it may have a keratin sheath because it's teeth, but it doesn't come from the skull. It comes from the fusing together of the teeth.
Mhm.
I thought it'd be fun to show him. Right. So the shared features. So they're part of amphibiforms, a sister group to the Bacero-Iliaruciiforms or the Reptiliforms. They've got armored tops and furry bottoms. They have a wide range of climates, but large part of Zalea falls below 10 degrees Celsius in the winter on average. So, and I'm also not opposed to there being some with more osteoderms beyond than just the back. We can have some pretty armored up looking
Mm.
guys.
I'm
As I meant,
imagining. For some reason, I can never remember what it's called. Is it Armadillosuchus? I,
Armadillosuchus.
I want to just check if I'm getting the name right because I feel like yeah, Armadillosuchus is the one that has like crazy like armadillo shell.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. This will be good to keep in mind. All right. Armadillosuchus. Yes. So the male brooding, which you've already talked about. This one mentions scoots, but the other file where we looked at the dewlaps mentions the milk drool. And the conventions, I'm going to be referring to the male ones as bulls, and male adults as bulls, and then following that, we can call the female adults cows, and then the juveniles or the young calves. I don't know, like in the States, and when we've gone to Florida and stuff like that, they call the alligators there bulls. They have bull alligators.
Mhm. I think that's
So
fairly standard. Yeah. I don't
okay,
actually know what you call a young crocodile though.
probably a hatchling, but I mean these things
Yeah,
don't hatch.
that's not helping.
Oh, I'll see you soon, Maddie.
Oh, bye
Every
bye,
creature is
Maddie.
just huge in the Antarctic Ocean. That does tend to happen.
Yeah, the all the results that I can immediately find just say hatchling, so I guess that's just
Yeah. Right. So they're beaked like rhynchosaurs. Um,
mhm.
yeah, the top two teeth fusing together. So, and I was thinking that we could have different orders or the main groups kind of form based on how their bottom teeth fuse, or because I believe outside this we talked about tuataras.
Mhm.
So, and tuataras, their skulls look really wild. Where was that? I don't know why this doesn't take up the full screen. My okay, what is it? Tuatara.
Mhm.
Yeah, they just kind of like fuse together with their teeth kind of on there, which is
Yeah.
here's another one. Yeah, which is neat.
And in the modern, the only species, the only extant species, it's not particularly prominent, but in some of the older species, like the Rhynchocephalians, in general, used to be on the same level of diversity as lizards are today.
Hmm.
Um, but then the squamates gradually started sort of replacing them throughout the Mesozoic, and so um, some of the Mesozoic forms had much more prominent, yeah, beak-like mouth parts.
Cool. So yeah, so different ways that their their jaws or teeth fuse. The other one I was looking at was a parrotfish, and I do have examples. And then rhynchosaurs as well. Like they have like what is it? Like it's fused on the outside, so they've got like teeth coming up on here and coming down in the middle.
Yeah,
I
they've
think
got
I've
these
got,
weird, like rodent sort of dentition with these enlarged cheek flanges as well.
and do one of the wants is to have a prolific like rodent-like order that does take up the niches of like I guess our reptiles and rodents, like just
Mhm.
like little guys who can eat seeds and I guess the Devian equivalent of insects and like those sorts of things.
Are there
Uh,
insects?
there are there I haven't I'm showing them in the next video that comes out.
Ooh.
So I think I've shown you some in the past, but they'll be revealed uh, in the future. So these are some of the sketches I was working on to kind of find the kind of aesthetic. Um, and so here in the one left hand side, you can see how the from the front that more like rhynchosaur looking beak structure.
Mhm.
I do like the idea of them having like a variety of different colors. I was thinking about dewlaps. Some of them I was thinking of being bipedal. because we do have some bipedal uh, members of Pseudosuchia. Or
Yeah, it was surprisingly. It happened at least twice, I believe.
ooh,
Which is, and it also happened at a bit about the same time that the dinosaurs also adopted bipedality. So this is why there's a lot of confusion and misnamed or misidentified groups back in the day, because you see this thing that, like, smock, for example. There's
hmm.
a particular species called smock Wawelski, I believe. It's named after the Polish dragon. And
Okay,
there is
okay.
still a fair bit of contention about whether or not it's a dinosaur, or I believe the consensus is that it's not a dinosaur, that it is
Uh,
actually a pseudosuchian. But
oh, that's cool.
we still don't really know, because the parallel evolution during the Triassic was really, they they arrived at surprisingly similar designs.
And something I think would be fun is that if a majority of the bipedal um, critters were herbivores, because I think we have this idea of dinosaur looking things where the bipedal ones are by and large carnivores.
Mhm.
I think like the more charismatic dinosaurs are like bipedal. And I mean, the dinosaurs we still have today are bipedal. So
Yes.
I think it'd be interesting to play with that.
Mhm.
Um,
And it kind of
oh,
reminds me of how the recent headline of Matabarosaurus, which has been mostly reconstructed as being this large, bulky quadruped,
mm,
um, the recent study on it, the researchers have determined that it was probably an obligate biped, actually. Um,
oh, so
so
it walked around on all fours, but it could run on a
no, see, so at first it was thought to be an obligate quadruped. Then
right.
there was, like most hadrosaurs are believed to have been at least facultatively biped, like they could
Ah,
rear up if they wanted
yes,
to.
yes,
Whereas
facultative. Okay.
Matabarosaurus was actually, it couldn't walk on all fours at all. It simply didn't have like the forelimb anatomy that was capable of supporting it. So it would have always been a biped, which is kind of interesting, because that's the reversal of what we would expect. Usually it
Yeah,
turns out that the bigger, more heavy set animals tend towards quadrupedality, but clearly not always.
that's cool. Um, so this is one of the ones where I started getting towards being fuzzy. And I have two versions of this one. One is quadruped, and this one is more of a biped. I think he looks kind of like a tauntaun from Star Wars.
It does actually. Yeah.
um, but yeah, so I do have these crests on it as well that are more brightly colored, um, playing with that kind of rhynchosaur looking snout with these, kind of tusky looking bottom teeth. We've got more extensive coverage of those scoots on top as well. And what else we got? Oh yeah, this one I like. So here's another herbivorous one where there's like that fused bottom jaw. I think in this sketch here, I have it so the tusk is actually a part of the fusing, but then down here, the tusk is separate, and the actual beak, the bottom is also fused. And I was thinking more like a parrotfish, because if we look at a parrotfish, like I think people usually call them beaked.
Mhm.
Um, but it's terrifying. There you go. Come on, I just want to see the picture. All right. So oh, this bottom part here is like the teeth have fused together to create this kind of beaky looking structure. Um, so I think that may be another one, and I was kind of thinking about that for some of the herbivores, uh, because yes, it also looks kind of horrifying too. And I imagine the legally distinct humans showing up and seeing something like this. Yeah, here we go. I think we can see it here pretty well. You can see that there's all these different teeth that are kind of just really close together.
Hmm.
So I think that would be quite fun.
It's a similar situation in triggerfish, I think.
Triggerfish.
Yeah, because there are some. I think it's the reef triggerfish. I might be mixing up two different species, but I think it's the reef triggerfish that has like adapted for dirophagy, so eating shells and things, and so it's got this quite powerful sort of crushing beak structure.
Okay.
Looking at those pictures is making me doubt myself. I'm fairly certain it's at least one of the triggerfish that are
One of the triggerfish.
specialist durophages.
All right. We'll have to. Well, the little yellow one here looks kind of like it. May want to invest. Yeah, we'll investigate. And then also, of course, we have the green color of the scutes and of this crest that's coming off it. So that could be quite fun. Oh, that's the Humu Humu Nuku Nuku Apu Aa. That's cool.
It is. That's the one.
Dope. Oh yes, and then here we have another one. This one has all these little knobbies on it. Technical term, I don't know. We got Thagomizer to work, so
Yeah.
and here we have this beak shape that I really like. And on the bottom, when he opens up his mouth, you can see that the two rows of bottom teeth have kind of fused together into this kind of sharp structure that has the pointed at the end, and then kind of like blade as it kind of arcs. And these are just just concepting it out. Oh yeah, then I also have another one where, oh no, is this gonna mess up on me? No, it's not. Great. And I also have another one where it had more of like these I don't know, ossicone kind of horn structures coming off. Kind of reminded me of some of the heraldry for griffins. And since I'm giving fantastic names to some of these groups, like having dragons, I think calling the suchiformes the common name of griffin would be quite fun because they are beaked.
Yeah.
And not all griffins have wings. There are distinct groups of griffins, especially in heraldry, that don't have wings. So
Where do griffins actually originate from in terms of the mythology? Like,
we don't know. They are exceptionally old. We have very old like Minoan ones. We have very old ones from Mesopotamia. They are like they seem to be kind of like a creature in the broader Mediterranean world. So yeah, they're
interesting.
like yeah, and then we also have the this one being a bit more of a carnivorous one, which could be interesting. This is the first round of the ancestral suchiform. You can see that he doesn't really have like the full kind of armored back scoot structure, and his tail's kind of stumpy. And then I did another pass, got something that was a bit closer to what I wanted, and they're going to be quite small. The ancestral form.
Oh, right.
Is because like this is what they're coming from. This is the critter that has been surviving in Zalea alongside the Baceriforms, which would have had a huge amount of diversity, similar to dinosaurs or whatever. And they may have been dinosaur-like because they produced dragons at some point, but not necessarily going into those critters too much. But these guys would have been hanging out alongside them in their shadow. The sort of proto griffins would have been largely small. I mean, they would have would have been generalists, omnivores, and their small size, their varied diet, and their adaptations, like having their fuzz and those sorts of things, and having their male brooding and being able to take care of their young and give them extra nutrition and help them out, helps them survive the mass extinction, which is both caused from periods of volcanism and acidification from Becerra kind of coming together,
Hmm.
the supercontinent coming together, and then the cooling, the glaciation that came after that.
So, two thoughts occur to me.
Yes.
One, that's kind of fun because it's kind of an inversion of what we saw in the Triassic. Because in the Triassic, like, there's this popular idea of the entirety of the Mesozoic being like the time of the dinosaurs. But
Yeah.
one of the reasons why the Triassic is really interesting is because there was just so much going on. There were all of these different groups that came about in the aftermath of the Great Dying, and they were all kind of vying with one another.
Yeah.
And during this time, the dinosaurs were like a relatively small, inconspicuous group that were kind of living in the shadows of the other groups, like the Pseudotsuchians, the Rauisuchians,
Mhm.
etc., that were the ones that were the really big dominant ones. Like, Phaseolasuchus is the I think I'm safe in saying that Phaseolasuchus was the largest terrestrial carnivore other than the later theropod dinosaurs ever.
And that
Um,
was a quadrupedal
mm,
pseudosuchian, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And he had like,
Um,
at least I see it in Paleoedus, kind of having like a T-Rex head.
yeah, sort of these squared off, very blunt, crushing jaws. Another one that's kind of fun is Erythrasuchus because it has one of
Erythrasuchus.
the largest head to body size ratios of any terrestrial animal ever. Its jaw is like half the length of its body or something ridiculous, and it's just this incredibly just. I mean, I guess those jaws were just adapted to just crush anything that got too close. Um, but yeah, in this case, we have kind of the opposite happening, where the Pseudotsuchian equivalents are kind of outlasting the dinosaurs in their own way and going off on their own, surviving the extinction and going off in their own independent direction, which is quite fun because we could
Yeah.
very easily have imagined that happening in our own timeline. Like the dinosaurs being as successful as they were largely just down to luck. So,
And I think that is something that I have noticed where like even when we're thinking about birds, right? It's like, well, our birds today have beaks, but historically there were so many toothed birds.
mhm.
And it's like, well, why do we have beak birds today? Instead of, and there are arguments that people make about like, oh, they're like lighter or more efficient or what
Mhm.
have you. But I think that's kind of arguing from you know, from like this kind of triumphalism where it's like, well, these are the birds that are around today, but like I think we equally could have ended up with toothed birds.
That's a good
You know,
term, triumphalism. Is that
yes,
an established term?
it's a term that's you. So triumphalism is a term that's used around like history and usually conversations of like the Great Divergence, for example. So it's like certain polities, uh, or certain situations exist in the world, and there are often like historical analyses that kind of just read the success as predetermined.
Mhm.
Like a very common example of that, for example, would be like the Spanish conquests in Meso and South America, where it's like, oh, well, yes, of course, the argument is, of course, the Spanish would have succeeded, and they point to some of the early victories, which were very contingent. If we're thinking about Cortez in particular. There were several times where he could have died, and he was very lucky. And then, of course, after, Cortez defeated the Mexica, the Aztecs, there was still took centuries of fighting to actually establish, the territory, the borders of Mexico. And it's like they suffered some pretty crippling defeats. They suffered like long-standing resistance and those sorts of things. But so the idea of triumphalism is that we read the past through the lens of the present and we see
Hmm.
the success as inevitable. But it's like,
Yeah,
it wasn't anything but, right? Like, a lot of these things are contingent. Um, and, we always have to uh, look at the time, where these things are coming from.
that's a very similar thing to the because yeah, I want to start using that term now because there's a lot of situations in which that does apply. But like the classic example in biology is thinking, the sort of march of progress that
Yeah.
everything kind of leads to, like humans as the pinnacle of
Hmm.
what that life was sort of inevitably marching towards. Whereas if we actually look at natural history, if, for example, the meteor didn't hit at the end of the Cretaceous, like, there's absolutely no way that humans would have somehow been arrived at in the same way. So yeah, same
Yeah.
sort of idea.
And we have a similar thing because we talked about state formation and stuff as well, right? Like, you know, states are just one kind of polity among many, and they've really only been the dominant form of polity for the last, few hundred years. While most people would have lived under states for the past few thousand years, just because, they tended to be more like settled agrarian societies and they had, larger populations. Most polities were non-state polities. So like thinking about, the inevitability of the
Mm.
state or the success of the state, um, kind of the end of history sort of things. And then from
Yeah.
supernatural ecology, if a cell was a few micrometers away from where it was 2.1 billion years ago, fungi, protists, plants, and animals did not exist. Yeah.
Yeah. The butterfly effect, as it's called.
And I think we're at about 11, so more or less halfway in the stream. So we can just take a bit of a break because I think
Cool.
we've kind of gone through all the background and now we can start doing the spec bio.
Mm.
So let's spend some time to think about our sponsor, the Green Dragon, whose golden tail is the sun. Please take the next few minutes to venerate uh, the dragon appropriately. I'm gonna grab a coffee and stuff, and
Hmm.
yeah,
I'm gonna get
we
some tea.
excellent, and we should be back. All right. And well, of course, we would be nothing without the green dragon whose golden tail is the sun. The channel is very much supported by viewers like you and some viewers here indeed. Over on Patreon, you can join the Speculative Geographers Guild and have monthly updates, sneak peeks about the next video, what's going on, plans for things ahead. The patrons would have known about this series in advance. And yeah, you can support over on Patreon. If you haven't already, you can like and subscribe. Check out the other stuff. A comment and a hype also always help. And once Bib's ready, we can jump back into it. The sun was out right now. I am luckily in a CSB climate, so it is currently very sunny. Mr. Sun. And I guess going back to that conversation about triumphalism, evolution is often dependent on a life form being in the right place at the right time. Yep. Boom. There we go.
Hello.
And we're back.
So I will go ahead and hedge a little bit from the top because, I actually did my dissertation on Mesozoic crocodilomorphs, but
Ooh.
I focused almost entirely on the marine radiations, the Thalattoseuchians. So the terrestrial varieties are actually not. I'm not overly familiar with them, so I will do my best.
Well, that is exciting because, come on. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Finally. Just going over some of the other, just going over the wants and the goals. So the goals of the series is going to have just kind of outline several orders, and we want to include, carnivores, herbivores, omnivores. Not that they need to be distinct, though I do think maybe like, the group that has a more parrotfish-like beak is probably going to hedge towards certain roles. Meanwhile, those with the kind of the rhynchosaur or tuatara jaws are gonna go in different directions. We also want to think about different adaptations and groups that would be in the variety of regions of Zalea. And we can look at Zalea briefly in a sec. We want a variety of mating systems, even within the same, like taxa, I guess, in a broader sense. So because we have the male brooding, and due to the variety that we see even within like seahorses, pipefish, and sea dragons, we have examples of monogamous or more often serially monogamous groups. We have examples where you have promiscuous male individuals and male adults, and we also have ones with promiscuous female individuals where the female individuals of the species are the ones with the display features and are slightly bigger than the male individuals. So we can have kind of the reverse of what we see commonly in terrestrial animals, which I think could be interesting.
This is because the expected thing as predicted or as suggested by Bateman's principle. It's definitely not a 100% thing, but it's a general rule of thumb is that the sex that experiences the higher burden during reproduction is the one that is more selective in terms of mate choice. And in most instances, just because eggs are almost by definition harder to produce than sperm, it will be the females that are more selective, hence why in most terrestrial species, polygyny is the norm. In something like 95% of all mammals, they're polygynous. But
Mhm.
if we have this male brooding system, that will sort of even the odds, if you like. And so
Yeah.
that means we can sort of like the situation in birds, where birds have an uh, unusually high preponderance of monogamy
Yeah.
because the majority of birds have very altricial young that require a high investment from both parents. And so in this instance, we might also see, yeah, a much stronger tendency towards monogamy and even polyandry, which polyandry is very, very rare. Um,
Yeah.
there's some examples like jacanas, I think, are pretty well known as a type of
Mm.
bird that have these polyandrous systems. Um, and yeah, polyandry, even when it does happen, it's very rarely a species like primary um, mating behavior. It's almost always like a sort of situational thing. Um, but in this case, just because of the way, yeah, their uh, brooding system evolves, we could see some more sort of what's the term? Dedicated
Yeah.
polyandrous species. Something similar to what happens in Galapagos vultures, which have this
Ooh.
very strange system of cooperative polyandry. I don't know if there are any other known examples of cooperative polyandry where you have a single dominant female presiding over a group of males. Um, there are no true
Is it these
vultures. It's
guys?
that's a frigate bird. I'm not sure
Oh.
why it's showing that, but it's Buteo. I can't remember what the species name is now, but uh, yeah, the
Is
Galapagos
it the
hawk. There it is, not
hawk?
vulture.
Okay. Cool. Cool.
Yeah, that was my bad. But yeah,
That's a
they
pretty bird.
have a system where a single female will have multiple males that she pair bonds with simultaneously, and they all help
Ah.
raise the chicks together. So could end up with something along those lines.
Yeah. Well, that could be interesting because I was thinking of because I think yeah. So I think this could be interesting because in this case, the the female suchiform could then deposit eggs with multiple males,
Mm.
and if she has a harem of males, then based on based on the dominance within that group, they can be selected for. So they're just kind of waiting for their turn uh,
Yeah.
to be oviposited. The other thing I was thinking of, which could be interesting, is where we have a bull that is larger and more dominant and is essentially, trying to corral and herd um, cows into depositing eggs into uh, his brood pouch.
Mm.
So like we could have, you know, across the suchiform group a variety of these different systems that emerge.
Mhm.
And what I also think would be interesting from that is, especially for the Dovians who come here, and they're going to be hunter gatherers, kind of engaging, and there's going to be a couple migrations. Um, but especially for the hunter gatherers who are engaging with them, their experience of the world and their relationship to these animals is going to be different than those, than the people who are engaging with the mammaliforms or the dragons. So the things that they think are normal and the way that different kinds of animals engage with one another, since a lot of hunter gatherers see themselves as part of the broader community of nature rather than with more agrarian sedentary societies who see themselves as distinct. Because
Mm.
in order for agrarian societies to maintain their cultivated environments, they're constantly pushing back against different species
Sure.
encroaching on their land, right? Like, your fields, you have to constantly, you know, tend the fields and the edges of the fields because stuff is constantly growing into it. And so, especially when these groups are kind of developing their, for us at least, like for me, for the project, like their early sort of sociocultural ideas and taboos and how they think the world should be, it'll be very interesting to have like this wide variety of megafauna that have like these different ways of organizing themselves that they can
Mm.
look to say, oh well, that's, we are most like these creatures and this is how they organize and we're going to organize that way,
Hmm.
because this is something that we commonly see, people justify how society ought to be by looking at animals around them all the time. So what happens with the Zaalean Deviants when they're hanging out in Zalea and they see all these different systems happening?
Hmm. It's quite fun.
Come on, let me no. I don't know why it works sometimes. It doesn't work other times.
The screen
Uh,
share.
no, like my I should be able to swipe it open and like a tab. These tabs appear, but sometimes it doesn't do that.
Oh,
Madeline's back. Welcome back.
welcome.
Uh,
Another thing, while I remember it, because this occurred to me during the break, um, and I have not thought about this at all, so I don't know the possibilities that this idea presents are not yet clear to me. This could just go nowhere or just be like a little footnote. But
yeah.
something that's kind of notable, it depends on how much we want to lean into the crocodile like thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the interesting things about a lot of crocodilian and some other reptile groups reproduction is that they have temperature dependent sex determination. So, like in I can't remember which groups do it which ways, but there's two general sort of patterns. There's one where there's a specific temperature threshold. So if an egg is incubated above X degrees, then it's female. If it's below X degrees, then it's male. And then there's I can't remember what it's called, but like the intermediate gradient, where like if the egg is between these two temperatures, then it will be female. But if it's anywhere outside, either hotter or cooler than that range of temperatures, then it will be male. So I don't
I'm think
know why that's the case. I'm not sure how much it is known why that's the case. There's, from what I can remember, I did some research on this a couple of years ago, and I think it's still largely just not understood why this is a thing. But if we wanted to tie that into the brood care thing, number one, in any situation, you're going to want to have a way of regulating the temperature of the eggs, especially if
yeah.
we are getting relatively cold periods at some times of the year. Then having, keeping them close to the body in a pouch or some such thing will definitely help with that. And
Yeah.
it could maybe also form part of some mechanism of regulating sex ratios or something. But
Yes. I was also thinking that, yeah, like the how, because we could still do the temperature dependency, because if the egg is closer to the abdomen, then it would be warmer than eggs that are further away on the
mhm.
pouch, right? Like if you've got where's our little guy? Here's our guy. No. I need to change my settings so that stops happening. All right, so because if it's like if the eggs, because we got the pouch in here more or less. Like if the eggs are in certain areas, then those eggs would probably stay warmer.
Mhm.
And if the eggs are on the outside of the pouch, then those eggs would likely be cooler.
And there could even be specific mechanisms, like if certain parts of the pouch have like a richer blood supply or something, then by regulating the amount of
Yes.
blood, then that could change the temperature.
Yes. Okay, that's fun.
And another thought that just occurs to me now, actually, going back to my mind's kind of all over the place. Forgive me. Just these thoughts are just popping in. But because is biasing breeding systems toward monogamy is an essential prerequisite for most forms of cooperative breeding. So, depending on how crazy we want it to go, like something similar to the situation in like African wild dogs, for example, would be very doable, where you have large packs or whatever we wanted to call the larger social structure that collectively care for each other's young. So we have like alloparenting going on, and again, depending on exactly how far we wanted to push this, we could even maybe dabble in eusocial tendencies.
Yes.
Like,
Eusocial crocodiles.
yeah, something like the crocodile equivalent of a meerkat.
And we are doing this like smaller kind of like the rodentesque, kind. So I think, we could have them being more eusocial. That could be interesting. But this leads me, and Kate also mentioned the internal structure of the pouch could become bifurcated. There could be different chambers in the pouch. Is something that I mentioned here, and the different chambers could then have different blood flow and those sorts of things. And I imagine if the flaps are coming together, then there could be, maybe there's two major pouches or something like that. I think that could be interesting. In the wants, the Marines. Yes, this is important. I think it would be fun for the suchiformes that are marine suchiformes to fill different niches in the water than crocodiles. And I was thinking that they could become fully marine hunters, like ichthyosaurs and dolphins and stuff like that. And crocodiles did this kind of, right?
There were some fully marine crocodile in the Mesozoic. None of them ever quite reached, like large filter feeder size, but there was some like Metriorhynchus is a pretty typical marine crocodile, and oh my god, it's been so long. Is it Dacosaurus or Dacosuchus? I think it's Dacosaurus. That's this large Dako, and then either Saurus or Suchus. I can't remember which. I think it's Saurus.
Dacosaurus. Here we go. Oh.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes. I think this is fun. Because I was thinking to fill the role of, I guess, like a semi-aquatic ambush hunter, like that crocodiles fill and like alligators and stuff. I was thinking there are other creatures that could fill that role. I haven't decided on them yet because I haven't really been working on freshwater ecoregions. I've largely just been doing terrestrial ecoregions. But I was thinking maybe one of the lisiforms, which would be the semi-aquatic amphibiforms, could do that. So like essentially like a large salamander.
Sure.
I was also thinking that we could, yeah, or uh, a uh, a very angry platypus could fill such a role. Like one of the monodermatiforms could go that way.
Yeah, I could see that.
So, so I'm thinking about how I want that to be played out, but I definitely think that these sorts of guys are cool. All right, is it up here? Come on. Oh, okay. We're just gonna do this the normal way. No, because I want. Never know. There we go. So we already talked about an apex predators that are preferably quadrupedal. One of the critters that I want to get to is a carnivore that becomes a commensal domesticate.
Okay.
And I like the idea of them being. I was looking at painted dogs, which is why I bring them up, in that they could have a similar structure to painted dogs, but what I really like is that they have this kind of consensus rallying before hunts, where they all come together and they chirp with one another to agree to go hunting.
Hmm.
And I think that could be interesting as a way to initiate hunts with the Dovians. So, they're living in the same environments, they're hunting similar things. Uh, then, they kind of engage with one another in initiating hunts. And because, the hunter-gatherer Dovians would be, regular observers of their environments, and they would know the behaviors of these animals. When these animals come over and start chirping with them, then they can start beginning this what is originally kind of like a interspecies hunting relationship, and kind of transition that into kind of a domestication. And yeah, having like these large gregarious groups, I think, could be very interesting.
Sure.
So you mentioned the painted dogs, so I think that would be fun to get to. Uh, and then in addition to the rodent-like critters, yeah, creating a kind of herbivorous group where we can have, uh, yeah, that it can essentially become the main like dairy animal
Hmm.
with either mouth drool or scoot milk. I have not decided yet. Um,
This is actually kind of similar to an idea that I still need to work out the details for in the next domestication video, because I'm thinking,
mm,
because the ramphodonts, the one of the dominant groups of large terrestrial animals, they actually have a broadly similar thing where they have a special chamber in their foregut that produces a special enzyme to initiate this sort of the initial breakdown of tough vegetation, and then they
yeah.
regurgitate it for their young. And I was thinking maybe the neotex could do that with. I don't know how much sense it would make to eat another species like regurgitated, like essentially vomit.
I mean, if it's nutritious,
I mean, because the neotex they're not obligate carnivores, but they tend
yes.
towards carnivory, and so they wouldn't be able to eat most like woody plant materials, whereas these
Mhm.
domesticates could. So they could get them to sort of pre-digest them and then spit out this gooey stuff that would be much easier for their body to metabolize.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I could see them moving towards that, especially. So, I mean, we'll probably talk about this more for the world building festival. Um, but one of the theories that contribute about domestication, and there are some issues with it, primarily that it doesn't have like a process for domestication. It just kind of sets the groundwork for
Mm.
how some theorists think domestication happened. Is that um, humans were going after like high value resources, high value food resources. And then when those high value food resources diminished, they then had to use the low value resources in their environments that they were kind of using, but they preferred the high value sources. So, from like if there's a group of humans that primarily hunts mammoths, like that's where they get most of their nutrition from. The idea is that this is high value because it's big and it has a lot of calories in it compared to how much effort you spend processing it. Meanwhile, a rabbit, which is much smaller, has less calories and takes a lot of time to process for those calories, in case anyone's ever had to process a rabbit before. So if you're in a situation where, you largely eat mammoth and then you have like rabbits and tubers and grasses and other things that you eat on the side, when the number of mammoths goes down, what then happens is that people start more intensely harvesting those low value resources in comparison. And the optimal foraging theory argues that that's what encouraged domestication. They don't talk about. There's a lot left out of this, and that's why I think like niche construction theory is very important for talking about domestication. And yeah, we'll talk about that in September, I suppose, and maybe a bit later in this series as well. But you could see a situation where you have neotechs, that are engaging in their obligate, carnivory or largely obligate carnivory. Were they mesocarnivores or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then their major food sources they're hunting start diminishing. And so they turn to alternative sources of nutrition to supplement that. And if they're already kind of constructing a niche where they're including these ramphidonts in their land management systems, then and assuming like, so if you had like a very large critter they were primarily hunting and then the ramphidonts are smaller, the more they would then, when those large critters, when they start diminishing in the environment, they would more intensely manage the ramphidonts and then kind of like bring them more closer into their system, and then get the domestication, and then their vomit becomes more useful as a food source. So I think, and maybe they originally start managing them for their meat and their bones and those sorts of things, but then due to changes in the in their food in their food ways, they then rely on the vomit. So that is a way I see it emerging.
Sure.
Though we would have to, you'd then have to think about constructing the land management and systems that they have in order to facilitate both of those things, which isn't necessarily difficult. But yeah, often hunting in and of itself does not, even though it is a system of land, like hunting is often a way to manage species that hunter-gatherers used. It doesn't usually lead to domestication. But yeah, I think that could work.
Cool. Yeah,
and
I still need to think about some of the details, but
I think, yeah, and in the broader Mediterranean world, particularly looking at West Asia, around the time that a lot of domesticates start to emerge, we do have, in like the Neolithic, we do have what's referred to as the broad spectrum revolution,
Yeah.
where we see a shift from humans primarily eating, again, what I believe it's Flannery, what is referred to as these high value resources to lower value resources. And this is, of course, where we do get a lot of domesticates emerging, like, goats in the Zagros, and cattle, and donkeys, and other stuff kind of popping up. And then, of course, we also have the like the founder crops from that area as well.
Hmm.
Though we also see in other places situations where people just kind of shift their food ways, where they're hunting high value stuff, and then they just the high value foods, quote unquote, are still around, but they decide to do other things.
Hmm.
So, you know, the hunt, and then, we also have, yeah, like there'll be other kinds of animals around that people could hunt and get food from, but they just decide to like hunt very specific things. They start specializing in what they hunt, even if those things are not, traditionally high value.
Hmm.
And of course, the OFT doesn't necessarily describe the processes behind domestication or why people did the things they did.
Hmm.
It just kind of provides an explanatory framework as to why people may go about doing it, or they may go about more intensely managing their environment.
Hmm. Interesting.
But for yeah, but for the commensals, I think it'll be interesting for them to be like largely like gracile kind of pursuit hunters who are living in these more these large packs with this kind of collective care. And what may also be fun is after, and partially inspired by your emphasis on alerts in domestication in your last video,
Hmm.
I think it'd be very important for these folks to have a critter that can alert them when dragons are coming.
Yeah, I can see that. That would be quite useful.
And because they engage in, what is it, allo parenting?
Hello, parenting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because they engage in allo parenting and collective care, when they're in their domestication, they then incorporate people and children into that, which would then, help protect them against dragons and those
Hmm.
sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
A
but
lot
yes,
of
I am excited.
I was just going to throw in that, yeah, in painted dogs and hyenas and other species
Hyenas
that
were the
have
other
these sort
one.
of, yeah, that have these sort of yeah, alloparenting systems where there's cooperative breeding. There's very often specific um rituals that they use when an individual returns to the pack after a hunt. There is depending on the rank of the individual, they will have specific like postures, and they'll like do specific like I don't know what the general term for it is, but like body movements, I guess, as a sort of signal, as sort of like a deference thing of like if a low
Ooh.
status individual returns to the pack, they'll do like they'll lower their head and like you know move their tail in a certain way, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that could be leveraged in some way as like a sort of a means of like interspecific communication between these animals and their domesticators. But I don't know. Hyenas have always struck me as one of those animals that, I mean, you could say this about a lot of things, but a species that could have been domesticated but just never was.
Yeah. Oh, and there are some very interesting relationships between humans and hyenas, and stuff. Yeah, primarily, I think East Africa as well, where they they move through cities and things. And while hyenas are often associated with, I guess, like being malicious or associated
Mm.
with evil in a variety of cultures, there are a few where they don't associate them. They don't have negative associations with hyenas, and the hyenas kind of move through their communities at night, and they seem to have like very high tolerance for people, and the people
Mm.
don't bother the hyenas. So yeah, so it's very interesting how in some places that relationship emerged, and we could have very different puppies than what we
Yes.
currently have. And I believe
Yes.
are they? I think they're closer related to cats, right?
They are within the feliform branch of
Ah, there we go.
carnivorans, but they are
There we go.
actually, I think their closest extant relatives are mongoose.
Mongoose.
I'm fairly certain they're within Herpestidae. Let me actually just check that. Uh, Hyenas. Yeah, they're in Herpestoidea. So, and this might actually even be something that I don't know if you would want to explore this, but yeah, hyenas are kind of famous for their the masculinization of females.
Yes,
Where
I was thinking originally in my notes. I was talking about instead of ovipositor, the language I was using was I think pseudophallus, which is what they use for the hyenas.
yes, and I again I looked into this relatively recently, and there is still a lot of debate as to why exactly this is the case. But
Mhm.
interestingly, and not nearly as often mentioned, is the fact that Madagascar and Fusa, which are relatively closely related
Usa,
to
yes.
hyenas, yeah, they also do the same thing.
No
Um,
way.
mhm.
And it
um,
FO, yeah, fossa.
yeah, it's spelled Fossa, but it's in Malagasy is pronounced Fusa.
Oh, okay. Great. See, I was just saying fossa. Uh, Fusa. Cool, cool.
I believe that's also an accepted pronunciation. But like
Yeah.
in prehistoric Planet Ice Age that came out last year, Tom Hiddleston pronounced it Fossa. So
Oh,
if they
okay.
allowed him to say that, I assume that that's acceptable then.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good.
Hmm. And Madagascar and Fusa also have polyandrous tendencies. Interestingly enough,
Wonderful.
they don't live in the same kind of cooperative breeding structures that hyenas do. They are still largely solitary, but a single female will very often court multiple males. Um, and they also have this really interesting thing where, even though they're mostly solitary, they have been observed teaming up and forming um, sort of what's the word convenient like sort of packs out of convenience. Like when there is a particularly large prey item that they're going after, they will often sort of team up momentarily
Yeah.
and then disband afterwards. And one of the ideas for this is that up until humans showed up, Madagascar did have some very large megafauna, things like Archaeoindris, which is this giant sloth lemur. You picture a
Oh, yeah.
lemur
I've
the
seen
size of
seen
a
that. Yeah.
gorilla. Yeah, so there would have been these large, very well defended prey species that the Fusa may well have had pack hunting behaviors to take down. And so what we're seeing now in modern Madagascar is just like the vestigial remnants of
Hmm.
these pack hunting behaviors that have, yeah, by and large gone by the wayside.
And I think because I've been, I do enjoy looking at the social structures of big cats because there's so much more that we're learning about how they engage with each other. And that's also something that jaguars do. Uh, Particularly like male jaguars will form alliances and team up especially to defend their territories against other jaguars that may organize to, push in. So yes, I like this idea. And yeah, so we have. Oh, and then of course, before going into the spec bio proper, I guess let's move something. All right, so what we're going to be primarily concerned with is, let's pick a better color. What colors don't we have? This is a problem I often have with the Copen, is because it uses so many colors. So if you need a color to write over it. Oh, and you finish off the bee climates. Hey, bee climates are always the fun ones. You can always add more bee climates. So we are primarily concerned with essentially all the stuff in here. And then there's like a little island off to the east that is occasionally separated from Zaalean. Oh, that's not very
interesting. When we say little island, we talking like...
Oh no, it's not very little at all.
Like Hispaniola size or like
Greenland
size?
No. I was being facetious. So we've got 2 islands that are part of the Zaalean Realm here that are quite large. Here we go. So we've got this one over here. Come on. All right, there we go. We have this one over here and this one over here, which are both part of the Zaalean Realm. And they are quite large islands. And then here and here, we've got currents that kind of create a separation in the biogeography of the realm. Let's throw the... Yeah. So the Zaalean Realm, what we're interested in is on one side of this mountain range, and then, the plateau that kind of separates Arukia from Zaalean kind of cuts it off in the south. I mean, there is, there, in the region in here, there is some overlap in which critters are found in which place. And of course, I do want the kind of rodent-esque one to be pretty prolific. So we're going to find the little rodent one all over the place. So it's going to be in Arukia, it's going to be in Lenotekea, and they're going to get to Alea because they fill a niche that other critters just haven't done very well. In the same way that Arukian dragons are also in Zaalean. So this sort of aerial space is filled. And then the primary pollinators of the flora are going to be the sprites, which are these little hummingbird-esque monotrematoforms with flight quills. And so those guys are also all over the place. But it does, there's still, I guess, ground-dwelling pollinators could have a niche. But, maybe that's something for the rodent-esque groups, maybe. And for the fruits and things, because the primary seed dispersers for the metamorphflora tend to be the blue dragons, and the plants have a variety of irritants and chemicals in their fruits that the blue dragons have evolved to tolerate and often incorporate into their toxungin glands to then spray as a toxungin. But as the fruits ripen and become overripe, the amount of those irritants decreases. And that's when the fruit tends to fall from the tree, and then other things can eat it. So, we can have critters that are frugivores that, maybe they compete a little bit, but they can also, eat overripe fruits, either off the tree or on the ground, or the shrub or the herb or whatever it is. Yeah, look at all the happy suns. I think this is where the bit with the dragon kind of came from. So, going back here, we have a wide range of climates on. There we go. So this is the kind of area that we're primarily concerned with. We have a decent amount of tropics. The rainforests are kind of limited. We do have some monsoons, and the monsoon in this case is the monsoon and the savanna in that case there are wet for a large portion of the year. It's just that during the winter, they tend to receive slightly less precipitation than necessary for them to be, more pluvial environments, whether it be a monsoon environment or a tropical rainforest. These areas in here are kind of a classic monsoon where they're exceptionally wet during the summer and they're very dry during the winter. And then we also have those CB areas, CW areas in here, which again are these kind of more temperate monsoonal areas. But otherwise, through here, everything is pretty wet all year round. They're humid all year. Things can largely grow all year, except where we have the continental shift. We do have several months that fall below 0 degrees. Something that's interesting is that we do have these basins. So the Western Cordillera has been building up because this sea here constantly drags crust from the opposite shore of Becerra and builds up these mountains. And so we do have these higher elevation areas that are largely arid or semi-arid. So that provides some interesting things to work with too. And we do have in this interior some hot arid regions, and it's that way because how far it is from where the precipitation is coming from. So it's over, I think it's over here is kind of pushing, I think 2,500 kilometers from where the water's coming from in the summer. And we also have this range here, which, at its highest averages near about 2 kilometers. So it's creating a rain shadow. If that wasn't there, then it would probably be more semi-arid, like this region in here. But yeah, so we do have like a wide variety of climates for these critters to adapt to.
Very good. And yeah, I'll just go ahead and throw in that. So pack hunting is very strongly correlated with open habitats, particularly towards the arid end. It's definitely not a 100% rule, but pack hunting is... I could go on a little bit of a ramble about this, but pack hunting I don't think is nearly as adaptive as a lot of people seem to think it is. Like there's a very strong like in Jurassic Park, like when they see the raptors are pack hunting, that's what. Oh, look at that! They're smart. They're working together, and it's always presented as if this is like an inherently better thing than solitary hunting, and that if something can pack hunt, and it must be intelligent, and it's very often framed as like, oh, they're just one step away from being sapient. Whereas in actuality, pack hunting most of the time is actually not really that effective of a hunting strategy. It only really pays off if you're living in an environment where prey is very widely dispersed and or is very well defended. Um,
Yeah.
so something like a savanna or a steppe with megafaunal herbivores that either live in herds or have some form of protection, maybe just in terms
Mhm.
of sheer size or actual armor or something like that, then that kind of forces predators to work together. Um,
So most of where are we? Right. So all of this area in here, uh, working up into this, yeah. So essentially, all the stuff on the eastern side of this line is more um, forested. However, there are shrublands. So we have this. The forested areas are concentrated in those that have more precipitation.
mhm.
Uh, and so, we have a lot of like riparian, so like riverine forests, forests, in basins, forests on the sides of hills and in upland regions and those sorts of things. And then between these forested regions, we are going to have quite dense shrublands. And this is because while there's a decent amount of precipitation, there is less atmospheric CO2. So
Ah,
trees are more difficult.
mm,
Everything on the west side is going to be a mix of shrub and herblands. There's still going to be like riparian and some high elevation forests, like, you know, in this area over here. But by and large, if you would expect to see a forest on Earth, there would be shrub.
okay.
And otherwise, they're going to be herblands. And I do have, where's my. This is from Zalea. No, this is from Arukia, sorry, from the first video, but it kind of like gives a bit of the vibe where we
Mhm.
have, copses of trees around rivers and wetland areas. Meanwhile, the rest is going to be like herbs and shrub and that kind of thing. So we do have very large areas to facilitate like mega herbivores
Sure.
that can have a variety of different defensive strategies, and this may then encourage the pack hunting to be a more useful strategy.
Mm,
Yeah.
very good.
And when and yeah, and then the Dovians who come here, are engaging in that kind of hunting in large parts of Zalea, and they form these commensal relationships and then start to specialize more towards that.
Mm. And the other thing is that cooperative breeding, well, especially eusociality,
Yeah.
um, is very strongly correlated with typically it's habitats where resources are distributed very in like patches where you've
Hmm.
got high clusters of very highly concentrated resources separated by large stretches of relatively inhospitable habitat. So like desert is like the primary, definitely not the exclusive, but the primary sort of environment where we see those tendencies coming about.
Okay. So we do have, I guess, two broad areas where that could develop here, where we've got we have these interior arid regions, and then we also have the hot desert as a place where that can happen. Though, as far as this sort of area is concerned, I mean, up here is a little different because that's an upland. There's a craton under there that's kind of slightly raised up. I think it's what, like 500 meters on average
Okay.
in elevation. I'm thinking, something more like the Laurentian uplands or something in Quebec or whatever, right? Like
Okay.
it's not very impressive, as like as a formation in height. These areas would still, I think, qualify, like all in here would very much still qualify for that, because of, we've got, I guess, large expanses of herbs with, thickets of shrubs and those sorts of things. And then, trees around lakes and rivers and those kinds of formations. So I think we'd still have, for critters that are not feeding on the vast herbs and are said specialized towards things that are more scattered, the eusociality would probably be more ideal. And we'd probably also see, for the mega herbivores, there'd probably be a decent amount of migration. Either we could see mass migration in some areas kind of between those regions that are more pluvial and during the winter. And this region is higher up. There's a more higher elevation. Let's go to the... There we go. So we do have like a slow change in elevation as it rises from the south as we go north into this area between the uplands and the Cordillera. So we may also see some sort of north-south migration into those uplands because they're cooler. So, and if it's cooler in the winter, more likely to be precipitation. And I also imagine migrations to more permanent water sources as well, especially during the arid winters. So I think we could make a decent number of scenarios that would encourage, more collective, like cooperative breeding and like eusocial behaviors by kind of organizing them in that way.
Very good.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, because we're at noon. We've been going for 2 hours. I think we may be at a good place to stop. And then next week we can kind of start breaking up the orders and start going in a direction and building out more critters. Yeah.
Cool.
Fantastic. So we got a decent amount done today. Like we went over all of the kind of background information. We got through male brooding, and kind of got us to the ancestral suchiform. Who needs a name? Doesn't have a name yet, besides being the ancestral suchiform. The ancestral griffin that we have here. Kind of went through the goals and the wants, outlined the kind of the geologic history as why Zaalean is the way it is, and then we also kind of did an overview of the climate scenario. So next time we are going to develop these folks out. And is there a particular direction that you'd be interested in exploring first, Bib?
Oh, not specifically. Yeah, I guess my instinct would be to say that probably the first thing that we should focus on, as you say, is just getting the orders established and just figuring out which traits go with which ones and kind of taking it from there. Because what traits we give each of them will, in some way, sort of give us a direction of, like, once we establish particular like feeding behaviors, that'll help a lot with the later diversification.
All right. So I'll give that a think. Over the next week, I will update the main document to include stuff that we've made notes on. And yeah, next week we're going to be doing that broad overview and sectioning out those orders. So thank you so much for joining me today, Bib. This has been a
You're
fantastic time. Especially your dissertation was on Mesozoic pseudotsuchias. That's very exciting.
Confess, I've forgotten very large chunks of it, evidently. That was anyway, that was a long time ago.
But anyway, thank you everyone again who joined us today. You know, if you haven't, like and subscribe. You can support Lands Unknown over on Patreon. The link is in the description. The link to Bib's channel is also in the description, and his Patreon as well. So please hit us up and join us next week as we continue into Lands Unknown and explore the broader orders of the griffins.
This was really fun. Thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, it was my pleasure. All right. See everyone next week, everyone.
Bye-bye.